Hey everybody, what is up? What is up? Big news, huge news, enormous news, game-changing news. Monolith, there is an update. There is a blog post, and I'm going to tell you guys all about it because there's so much information chalked into this blog post. A lot of things have been confirmed. A lot of things are still very kind of hush-hush secretive, but we know so much more now, and it is incredible. I'm going to share everything here with you guys now and give you guys my impressions and my opinions on what they say in this blog post. Alright, so they start off with TLDR. The Monolith update is here and huge changes are coming to Paragon, right? So, new smaller map, faster, more action-oriented gameplay. Ooh, every hero updated. Still a MOBA. Okay, that all sounds pretty good. The first thing they go into is why they're doing everything and what motivated them. So I will read this as such. The Monolith update represents the culmination of the past year of learnings, testings, playings, feedbackings, and talkings. Why do they word it like that? The changes that we are making are based entirely on addressing key feedback items both reported and directly observed. Sweet. That all sounds pretty good, and for a long time I didn't think that they were doing something like that. I didn't think they were paying attention, but they obviously are. They go on, the goal of these changes is very straightforward. We are confident that this new version of Paragon will deliver a faster, more visceral gameplay experience that you'd expect from an action game while retaining all of the metagame strategy of a competitive MOBA. When the Monolith update goes live on December 6th, we hope you will play at least 3 games and then continue to give us the valuable feedback we have been receiving for the past year. And play at least 3 games has been in bold. I wonder if that will tie into a new event. Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen, because this is going to be a long video, probably because the blog post is pretty heavy on information. The first section is called Back in Action, and they say the first major areas we want to address with this update is the size of the map, the lane structure, and the meta gameplay. The previous few blogs have detailed all of that, but once we had corrected the playing field, the next step was to address issues with the gameplay feel. We want to more solidly deliver on the promise of what we felt Paragon should be, and when we looked at the game in its current live state, we didn't feel that we quite nailed it yet. I agree completely. To that end, we have turned it up a notch, right? And they continue by saying, the first major change is that gameplay is faster. Specifically, we're talking about faster movement speed, ability, and attack execution speed, and overall game lethality. Oh, yes. We feel this direction will help Paragon truly achieve the goal we have always had, the MOBA that puts you in the action. And this is so good because Paragon, when you look at it, compared to Smite, compared to League of Legends, Dota, it is slower. It definitely looks slower. Especially after me watching the recent League of Legends World Tournament Championship, that shit was fast. You know, you got out of base into lane in less than a minute, and that's even with travel mode right now. That's sometimes not the case. It takes you forever. So this is really great, and man, movement speed, a faster movement speed. Oh boy, and I love the idea of faster abilities and attack execution, and we will get into that shortly. Their next topic, from here to there. The first part of our action pass involves player movement speed. Okay, we want players to feel that they can get around the map without travel mode, but we also want to ensure that we have one unified speed for the game. So essentially what they're going to do is turn it into Smite. Now Smite doesn't have a travel mode, but it does have smaller maps, and it has a unified speed, which is pretty quick. To that end, we've upped the speed a lot. The speed, oh boy. Once mastered, the new, faster move speeds will prove easier for players to understand in terms of which engagement ranges are safe and which are likely to land them in a free trip back to their core. This kind of worries me though, and here's why. The movement speed right now is tuned in such a way that regardless of whether you're playing on a controller or you're playing on a mouse and keyboard, it's not too difficult to land basic attacks and land spells because you simply don't have to deal with, crazy speed. I have a hard time playing Smite with the controller for that exact reason, because it's too quick. It's hard to land those basic attacks, especially with a ranged hero, unless you have some sort of really unfair lock-on ability for those controller users, whereas if you're playing on keyboard or mouse, that accuracy is almost imperative. I wonder if that's what's going to happen here with Paragon, because they said they're going to up the speed a lot. And if there's no soft lock-on mechanic for controller players, which would be kind of unfair compared to the way it is now, then People who are playing on controllers will definitely be left behind. They will definitely be at a disadvantage because the mouse players and everything, they can easily adjust for that speed with the mouse compared to the thumbstick. So I'm kind of worried about that, and I'm curious how they are going to balance that. They then move on to their next segment called It's Just Math and talk about the attack and abilities and everything. Delivering the desired gameplay experience discussed above can only be partially solved by movement speed. Attacking, using abilities, and combat all have to feel snappy and resolve quickly to get the full effect. To this end, we've changed the way damage, armor, health, and mana work. Oh, and I'm going to dive into all those too. So much so, in fact, that the patch notes you'll eventually receive for the Monolith update changes don't have any specific values for damage changes. We've chosen to omit these because the scale in which they exist are now totally different and didn't want players to evaluate the changes early out of context. Going forward, though, they'll make sure to be detailing all future variants as per usual. So, yeah, that makes sense. Their next segment, Damage Control, it talks about the new damage and abilities and everything. So what kind of major damage and armor changes are we talking about? We've reworked damage types, guys, to allow you to better itemize armor against incoming damage. Which, I mean, that doesn't sound good to me. Just reading that far in, I'm like, oh god, the last thing we need is for it to be easier to build armor, right? But let me continue. Primary attacks will now deal basic damage, while any activatable power will now deal ability damage. This is an important change that lets us get a much better handle on how ability-focused heroes scale in relation to the attacking heroes. This change carries over to armor and penetration, where basic armor will help defend against sustained primary attacks, and ability armor will help defend against incoming spells. A very interesting change. Very interesting. I like the distinction between basic attacks and abilities. I think that will be very interesting, and you'll have to definitely build a variety of armors now to suitably counter that. And then they say the concept of physical and energy heroes has been removed completely, and all players will now equip cards with a unified power stat to increase their basic attacks and abilities. Players who buy power will see that stat build into a percentage of all their outgoing damage, regardless of whether the damage comes from their basic attacks or their abilities. So buying damage as Gideon will increase your abilities considerably with a small bump to your basic attacks, while buying damage as Murdoch will primarily increase his basic attacks and not so much his abilities. And down the road, we'll be looking at adding cards which might allow for increasing only ability damage or doing cool things to your basic attacks. That sounds fucking awesome, and I can't wait for those kind of things. I can't wait for those kind of cards, because that sounds like exactly what I've been wanting. Oh yeah, and cooldown reduction is getting the axe. In their next segment, rest in peace, CDR. Oh boy. Cooldown reduction is no longer a stat that casually appears as a bonus stat on cards, nor is it one that can be slotted into cards via upgrades. That's gone too, upgrade cards for CDR, wow. The reason we've all but removed this stat is to help hit our gameplay goals of faster ability usage. We've dramatically reduced most of the cooldown in the game. You can still find a little bit of it, though, as part of the complete effect for certain cards. For example, the extra effect of Mind Flow will still grant cooldown reduction. But how much are abilities getting changed in terms of their seconds and cooldowns? Well, they say, as an example, Gadget's Sticky Mine has dropped from a 15-second cooldown to an 8-second one, and Rampage's Ultimate at level 3 has a brisk 40-second cooldown. Okay, this worries me really bad, because Rampage's Ultimate is fucking crazy right now, and he can tank inhibitors with it, and if they're reducing it that much, then that tells me one thing. They are reworking his ultimate to likely be much less effective, but to be used probably once or even twice within team fights. So maybe he's more of a sustain and less of like a, I'm going to tank all the hardest stuff for 10 seconds, I'm invincible. I don't think that will be the case anymore. You'll be able to burst him down a lot easier, but if it's just like lower sustain damage, then he'll be able to take that. That's what I'm thinking here. I'm looking into the future and trying to predict this here. The next segment, Mana makes a comeback. Mana has long been a devalued attribute in Paragon, except for those like myself who use Hydroverser, which is going to get a huge buff because, as they say here, this is going to change with Monolith. Part of the work around reducing most of the cooldowns is finding other ways to balance abilities. Some abilities with faster cooldowns will now be gated more by mana usage than time, and this means it will be up to you to decide how to approach ability usage. Buy mana for more activations, or spend your points on fewer, more effective activations of your abilities. Interesting. interesting. But I do know that mana as a general, in general, is getting a buff. Like, casters are going to get, like, base mana, like, twice as much, if not more, right? Next segment. But what about my main? With all that is stated above, it should now hopefully come as no surprise that we've rebalanced every hero in the game. Yes! Goodbye Twin Blast sucking. Goodbye Rampage being an OP piece of shit. Goodbye Greystone being a tanky motherfucker. That's gone. With an eye toward both faster speeds and faster killing times. Thank you, Jesus. I spent today, in the past few hours, I spent around... It must have been over 1 minute killing a Richter, from full health to nothing, with the help of a gadget, and I was Lieutenant Bellica. It took us that long to kill him. Like, we chased him pretty much throughout the entire map, just whittling him away while the other teammates were busy or dead. Oh, jeez, I'm so glad that's probably going to be gone. And since the gameplay you are watching now is from that same match, I'll make sure to show it to you guys. But anyway, moving on here, moving back into it now. So, wait, you want an example of everybody being rebalanced? Well, here's an example of one ability's changelog with Greystone. Reforged. That ability of his, Greystone, Reforged. Damage type adjusted from physical to ability. Enemies damaged by Reforged are no longer knocked up and stunned, right? No longer that. When Greystone dies, all enemies around him are slowed. This slow is more powerful the closer they are to the place he died. Reforged no longer puts Make Way and Assault the Gates on an additional 5-second cooldown, and then the cooldown has been reduced from 240, 180, and 120 to 180, 130, and 80. So now every 80 seconds he'll be able to respawn himself, and instead of knocking up and stunning, it will just be a slow. So that sounds like quite a nerf, actually, when you think about it, because right now it's hard to get hit by that stun knock-up at all, simply because you can just kind of walk away from him. But say that you're... Yeah, it's very unlikely that you'll ever be close enough to him in the center to get slowed that much, unless the activation of the skill itself has been massively reduced alongside everything else. But I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. So their next segment here is actually quite interesting. It's called Talking About Practice, right? And it's about how they are removing the current terms for heroes, ranger, jungler, all that stuff, with some new verbiage here. So for example, somebody who is good at carrying, i.e. Murdoch, is now called a marauder, and somebody who excels in the jungle is now called wild, right? So that's interesting. And they're also giving each hero a list of traits called hero traits that kind of describe them. So for example, Gideon is ranged, right? And his traits are burst, assassin, elusive, sieger. Interesting. I think that's pretty interesting. I don't know if it was particularly needed. I feel like they could have just added these hero traits onto ranger, jungler, fighter, tank, and so on and so forth. But we'll see. We'll see the execution once it comes out. Their next topic, I see you. Lastly, we want to detail some of the vision changes that are coming. Vision is a huge part of any MOBA, and Paragon is no exception. We've made some significant changes to how we handle vision in the game, with more to come. First off, since there are no longer any shadow pads, let that sink in. Players won't be able to find shadow wards without the ability to enter the shadow plane themselves, or have a ward themselves. Additionally, shadow wards are now deploy instantly, allowing quick vision sweeps. You'll now need your own shadow ward to remove your enemy's wards. Yep. Finally, wards themselves have gotten a gameplay update. They now are subject to the same line of sight restrictions that heroes are. This is interesting. I like this. No longer can you put a ward on one side of the wall and have it see people or enemies on the other side. That is good. I like that. That means strategic placement is much more important. Very excellent. And finally, wards themselves have gotten a gameplay update. They are now subject to the same line of sight, I already mentioned that, but they also have a new cooldown and charge system. This will mean that wards once placed are more valuable, so maybe there's less wards now? Interesting, I'm not sure about that. I feel like more wards, if anything, would be good, considering they just got a huge nerf. Okay, but that's all they say about that. Next topic, Minions in the Mist, and this is some pretty interesting crap right here. Beyond just the changes to wards, you may have noticed that I casually mentioned no shadow pads up there. It's true. They are a thing of the past. The original design intent behind shadow pads was to give a good line of sight breaking that wasn't built around actual line of sight breaking. Okay? Alright. Many other MOBAs employ this mechanic in several ways, and all of them hail from the glory days of old, when the term was called Fog of War. Essentially, we wanted shadow pads to give us the same impact, but it didn't. So what are they doing instead now? There's something called fog walls all throughout Monolith. They are quite literally walls of fog that obscure your sight. It's impossible to see enemies through them, and they'll block line of sight for both heroes and wards. Holy shit. It's like a wall. Awesome. I'll have a screenshot on screen for you guys to see as well. The gameplay we've seen out of these fog walls has been exactly what we've been hoping for all along. They make going into and out of the jungle a more surprising event, and they help create the laning experience we're looking to deliver. So this might mean that junglers will have a really good surprise for those that they are ganking, depending on the lane setup. I'm very interested in seeing this. Are you guys? In the last segment, but I want it now. Alas, there are still a few days left, or a few weeks, before you'll be able to experience Monolith. However, we're incredibly excited for you to play and get your first impressions. With all the math, speed, vision, damage type, and mana changes, it's a brave new world out there in Agora. Remember, the role you pick for hero is going to be important in how you build them and how you play them. Many heroes can fill multiple roles, so don't be afraid to experiment, and certainly don't be afraid to let your teammates do the same. Try playing at least 3 games. That 3-game thing again. I swear that's going to tie into something. And as always, thank you for support and helping us shape the game together. We're making something super awesome. Cameron Winston, lead hero designer. Sweet. I am pumped. This makes me feel a lot more confident in them going forward, because this whole time I was thinking, okay, yeah, they're just kind of like building this new map and, you know, probably changing a few things, you know, changing the harvesters in the jungle a little bit and adding some new buffs. And then they're going to call it good. They're not really addressing the meta because they haven't really been saying anything about it, but they're changing so much more than just the meta. They're changing so much more than just nerfing health and armor. It is a complete overhaul. It's going to be a completely new game, and I'm very excited to get my hands on it. I do have some concerns, though. We don't know how every hero is going to play since all of them have been rebalanced. We don't know how the movement speed is going to play. We don't know how the map is going to feel without travel mode. We don't know so many things. So while it is okay to be excited, I think we should also be concerned, not to the point of complaining, but just let's keep our expectations in check here and make sure that we aren't thinking that the game is going to be completely bug-free and completely balanced once we get our hands on Monolith. I do not think that will be the case. So if we just taper our expectations and expect a reasonably new experience that may have some issues, then I think a lot of people will be quite happy with it, myself included. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about this whole big post and how it might change the game. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Are you excited? Are you scared? Are you nervous? Let me know all the emotions that you're feeling. We'll have a good discussion about it. Oh man, I am the 6th, December 6th. Let's go. Early Christmas present right here. If you are a fan of my work here on YouTube, of these videos, then hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Now would be a great time to do so. Tons of Paragon content coming your way, especially once the 6th hits. Oh man, so many Paragon videos are coming out, you guys. And I am going to be reviving Solo Q Salt, not only for Paragon, but for Battlefield 1 as well in multiple modes. But still for Paragon as well. I'll probably cycle in between the two because I do like me some Battlefield 1, and I do want to play it more, and I feel like that would be a great way to get me to play it more, is to include it here on my channel a little bit here and there. So let me know what you guys think about that as well. And before you go, make sure you don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't enjoy the video for any reason, then hit that like button. I'd greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate you guys watching my content in general, and it all helps out the channel, and you guys are great. Wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for all of you. So thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it as always, and I will catch you next time.